So good morning to those of you that haven't met me before. My name is Jamie and I am the Interventions Manager for the EPOP project. What we're going to look at this morning is something called the 5 C's, which ultimately is about culture change and how to develop a positive culture within an organisation. I know that there are plenty of positive things that go on within the probation system, and it's about kind of spreading that really, and those little pockets of fantastic practice that does go on. How can we share that amongst our colleagues, and how can we create a culture where, you know, sharing, collaborating and being consistent in what we do helps us all move forward. First slide, Carla, please. So the aims of today are to understand how communication, collaboration and consistency can help to drive forward and create a culture change, to identify some of the important elements of team culture, and to use the 5 C's where possible in order to implement a positive change. And for those of you that have been on these talks before, I do ask you to pop in the chat one commitment to a new practice or a reminder of practice that you've done previously that you'll commit to at the end of this. Next slide, Carla, please. So in terms of culture, one of the key elements to a positive culture is the communication between staff, between colleagues, between line managers, all levels of any institution, really. So that communication is key to how people develop relationships, is key to how people work together, and is key to how people understand instructions and other elements of what people are trying to say. So that communication really needs to be regular. It needs to be clear. It needs to be honest and transparent. And that's something that I've been looking at considerably of late, that honest and transparent communication between people. I think sometimes we, as human beings, allow things to fester and don't always say what we actually mean, or the way we communicate what we mean isn't put across in the right way. And I think that's really key to having a positive culture, that communication is open and people are able to be authentic in what they're saying. They're able to be honest. They're able to be transparent. And getting that right is not easy. There are lots of companies globally that struggle with that element of communication, and it takes time and it takes practice, and it's got to come from everybody within the institution, from top to bottom and bottom to top. But communication for any organisation, for any team, for anybody that wants to be successful, it is really key, and that is a massive part of the culture. And it's how are people communicating, how often, how regular is it, what's actually being communicated, and, you know, are we checking that what is being communicated is actually being understood? And that's a really important point, particularly when working with, you know, the people who are on probation. What you're saying to them, have they understood exactly what is expected from them? And I spent many years as a teacher, and there were often times where I would communicate something to a classroom of students, and a number of the students wouldn't really get what I was trying to say. So I had to figure out another way of explaining it. Maybe, you know, the depth that I went into was too deep. Maybe I needed to simplify things a little bit more. And that checking of understanding that your communication is fully received, and, you know, they understand exactly what it is that they need to do, because that breakdown in communication can cause all sorts of issues. But if we're honest and transparent and clear with it, and we're checking in with people, and also in terms of communication as well, it's how things are communicated. You know, is it done in a pleasant manner? Is it done in a polite manner? Is it done professionally? At times, you know, how things are communicated is really important. And that old phrase of it's not so much what you say, it's how you say it, can determine somebody's response. Next slide, Carla, please. So when communicating, naturally, that communication will lead to collaboration and there will be some fantastic people on your team that have a number of different strengths, and that collaboration is key to any success. If you look at sports teams, there will be people within these teams that have different strengths, and those strengths collaborate, they work alongside each other, and that really is the way forward when working within any institution. You know, you're not necessarily working on your own. You're able to collaborate with the rest of your team, with clients, service users, line managers, whoever that may be. And that collaboration is really key. And having time for that collaboration, I know you guys are under some pressure in terms of, you know, the amount of candidates you have on your quota. I know that time is of the essence. And making time for that collaboration and not necessarily reinventing something that somebody's already done, or sharing that practice with others, or even signposting to people that can help in different ways, different third sector organisations. What we're trying to do here, and particularly with the probation service, is use EPOP as a collaboration to help support staff and support the people on probation. So we have a number of people. We've got relationship managers, we've got intervention managers, we've got experiential advisors that you can collaborate with and get in touch with us with regards to how they can help and support. And it's finding a way in which that best practice can be shared. It's finding a way to use the strengths of others to complement your own strengths. And I think that's something that's difficult. This whole culture change, you know, it's one of the buzzwords at the moment when people talk about culture. But when we look into culture, are people working together? Are people communicating? Are people allowed to be authentic? Are people allowed to try things and fail and reflect and move forward? And I get that, you know, with probation, a lot of it is security based and protection based, but there are still certain elements where we can collaborate and we can try certain things. And I think that open culture where people are able to do that is key. And that's got to come from the top as well. That's got to be people are encouraged to try different things, to share things that have worked. Next slide, Carla, please. Consistency for me is something that, you know, is part and parcel of all success. If you want to change the shape of your physique, you know, consistently, you need to apply effort. You need to consistently get to the gym. You need to consistently go through the things that you need to go through to create that change. And culture is no different. There has to be a level of consistency with your actions, with how you're approaching things. And I think ultimately your values have to align with the values of what you are trying to achieve. And a lot of companies shout out about values and shout out about key things that they're trying to achieve, but are they consistently promoting them? Are they consistently using them? There's nothing worse than a message that's sent to you with regards to what's expected from you if the person delivering the message isn't authentic in their approach or isn't consistent in their approach. And it's I suppose it's about role modeling, what you expect to see. You know, how you behave consistently in a professional manner will have an effect on your colleagues, will have an effect on the candidates that you work with. And your action, your approach, your enthusiasm. Don't get me wrong, we all have days where our energy levels are a little bit low and we're not full of motivation and enthusiasm. And sometimes we just have to get through the day, and that's okay. But if consistently your professionalism, your motivation is high, then that will rub off on others. And that consistency to do your job day in and day out will affect the culture of the place that you're in. And you know, everybody within the institution is part of that culture. You know, what are your values? Are your values aligned to the values of the company? What are you doing consistently on a day-to-day basis that allows those values to be evident? A lot of time, praise is something that can lack from certain institutions, and it was something we really used to push in education. And that's, even adults, as adults, we like somebody to tell us that we've done a good job. We like somebody to thank us and be appreciative for the job that we've done. And I think that's particularly important when working with people on probation. They may not have had elements of praise for long periods of their life. Their achievements may be minimal. And if we can focus on the positive and we can praise but be assertive in the other areas that we wish to improve, if we can be authentic and we can, follow through with the things that we say, if we're going to do something, let's hold ourselves accountable to doing that consistently. If we tell a person on probation, this is what we're going to do for them the next time round, is that consistently what we're doing? Are we following through with elements of our workload and elements of our promise that we're going through? And don't get me wrong, it's a difficult task, and a lot of the work that you do is quite reactive, where you'll have a plan for the day and that plan will be blown out of the water because something else happens along the way. But if we can communicate with each other, if we can be collaborative in our approach, if we can use the strengths of others, if we can be consistent in what we're doing, then ultimately that will lead to a culture change. And let's face it, we spend a hell of a lot of time at work. You spend 8 hours a day, roughly, at work. You spend more time at work than you do at home. And you've got to be happy in what you're doing. You've got to feel comfortable in what you're doing. And you've got to feel like, you're making a difference. And a lot of people within the industry that you guys are in get into this to make a difference, to change people's lives. And that does happen. I hear stories about that all the time, how probation officers have helped somebody turn their own life around, how they've helped them to help themselves, how they've managed to point them in the right direction, how their communication has been completely honest, where, individuals have never had that honesty before, where they've given praise where praise was needed, where they've told them the truth where truth is needed. And a lot of individuals that you work with are going to be carrying all sorts of different traumas. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a magic wand that's going to kind of, the same approach is going to work for everybody. It isn't. You've got to be imaginative. You've got to be creative. You've got to use your emotional intelligence to create a relationship with an individual. You've got to, be seen to be professional. You've got to be seen to help move that person forward. And I get it's difficult. And sometimes they're not ready for that. And sometimes, their actions affect that relationship. But your response to those actions is key to the consistency and the culture. Control anyone else's actions. What we can encourage them to do, what we would like them to do, the path that we would like them to follow, the benefits of that path that we would like them to follow. We can preach that all day long, but ultimately they will be responsible for their own decisions. And ultimately, we are the only people that we can control. So it's our response to the decisions that have been made. It's our response to the actions that people portray that we can really, really control. And within a positive culture, as professionals, as role models, as people that are there to help and support people that are less fortunate or have made a mistake or have made several mistakes, then that for us is absolute key. Next slide, Carla, please. So within a culture change, and again, this is something that's branded around all the time, but it does involve all staff at all levels. And it's how you treat people, it's how you speak to people, it's how you collaborate with people. And a thing that I've picked up on a lot is kind of practicing what you preach. If you are holding people to account for their actions, for what you've asked them to do, hold yourself responsible as well. If you've promised that you'll do something by such and such a date, then practice what you preach. You know, if you're asking somebody to have emotional regulation, show that yourself. If you're asking somebody to be more professional, show that yourself. If you're asking somebody to turn up on time at a particular time with certain things that they need, have that yourself. Be prepared. And I know that's kind of preaching to the converted, really, but the messages that it sends are very, very strong. If you communicate well, if you collaborate with people, if you're consistent in your approach, that message sends a really strong, positive message to the people that you're working with, the people that you're working alongside. You know, what non-negotiable behaviors do you kind of show every single day? And you'll do this subconsciously. A number of you will do this subconsciously. You'll be punctual. You'll be polite to people. You'll be professional in your approach. You'll control your reactions. You'll be emotionally regulated. And those behaviors that you do consistently will have an effect on others. And they do overall have an effect on culture. Who are you working with collaboratively? Who are you there to support? Who can you vent to? Equally as important. Have you got, you know, that trust and honest communication with your line managers? How can we get that? Again, it's not a magic wand. It's about working on relationships with people. It's about communicating with people. It's about being consistent in what you're saying and what you're doing. You know, what's your strategic plan? What is it? Particularly in education, this used to happen on a regular basis in terms of a strategic plan. A lot of it would be based on Ofsted outcomes. I know you guys go through a similar process. So what are your aims? What are you aiming to achieve? What do you need to improve? What are you really good at? We used to do something in education called KISS, which is what do we need to keep doing? What we need to improve? What do we need to start doing? And what do we need to stop doing? And we found that process really helpful in terms of constantly evolving. We're in a world that is ever changing. There are always things that change, and we need to be able to evolve and adapt with that. And certain things that we may have used 5 years ago, 10 years ago, may not be suitable now. They may have worked at that particular time, but again, there are lots of variables. Likewise, something that works with one person on probation may not work with somebody else. We've got to be prepared to vary the things that we do. We've got to be prepared to evolve. We've got to be prepared to hold our hands up if it's, you know, something that we haven't particularly done. And that's not easy. That's not easy to achieve, but you can achieve that by communicating clearly, by working with each other, and by being consistent in your own approach. And hopefully then that will drive a massive culture change, because the behaviors that people are showing on a consistent and daily basis create that culture, create that feeling, create that togetherness, create that feeling of support that, you know, people have got your back, that if something hasn't worked, you can go and discuss it with somebody. Next slide, Carla, please. So we've discussed for 20 minutes how the kind of, you know, the communication, the collaboration, the consistency can lead to a culture change. From all the things that we've discussed, is there one thing that's kind of stuck in your mind? Is there one thing that you're going to commit to do? Is there one, has it reminded you of a certain thing that you might want to do? Are you going to collaborate more with members of staff? Are you going to go and communicate a little bit more? Something I used to do a lot in education, we used to email as opposed to actually go and see people. And I think sometimes that level of human connection and human communication can be lost. So that was something that I tried to do from this training, to make sure that I had more face-to-face conversations rather than emails. Again, I'm not telling you what you need to do. But if you can just pop something in the chat, if you can pop any feedback in the chat as well. This is the last in the current series of talks, and there will be a new series out in January, towards the middle of January. So please look out for that. That will be emailed out. We'll advertise that on LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much for joining us.